Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here, the 3 Topics Gamer here, bringing you another episode of my weekly Q&A, how the people's questions were answered, serious questions that have been sent to me over the past week. This episode's pretty basic, nothing extraordinary this time around. I think we had like 6 questions. There were a number of questions I was able to answer in the comment section, so be sure to check if you happen to not hear your questions in the video for this episode. So, like always, if you happen to enjoy this video and like to see more content like it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and press the subscribe button to help grow the channel, because we just recently passed 55,000, which I think is incredible. And now we're 5,000 away from reaching the end of our channel goal, and though I think we will end up failing and getting close to it, I think that just the fact that by this point I can openly say that this year, just by growth, has been a much more successful year than last year. So I'm very happy because of that, and I want to thank all of you out there that are watching this channel that helped make that possible. So starting off with the first question coming from Lugina13. You want to know, do I think that Virgil was stronger when he was Neo Angelo, or do you think he remained the same in terms of overall strength? No, by Devil May Cry 5, when Virgil makes his return and he manages to evolve his standard Devil Trigger form, he is considerably stronger than Neo Angelo. So, but then you have to remember that it was like a good 10 or 15 years after that game by the time of Devil May Cry 5. So no, Virgil is considerably stronger by a wide margin than he was back in Devil May Cry 1. Next question comes from Shaheem Grimes Goku-san. You want to know, what threats are worse between the things Chris had to deal with and versus what Leon had to deal with? Okay, I think you're asking who... I think to simplify your question, you're asking who do I think dealt with more worse shit? And I would probably say Chris probably dealt with worse things than Leon. I mean, he did... Well, let's see. He's engaged Wesker on multiple occasions. He had to deal with a global pandemic. He prevented a global pandemic, and then he actually fought in one in Resident Evil 6. So, yeah, I would say between Leon and Chris, I think Chris has definitely gone through much tougher things. Next question comes from RevelationsTurtle, and your question was a bit extensive, so I'll do my best. And you want to know, I know you don't like this game, but I want to know what your thoughts on people went from loving The Last of Us to the point where they can't shut up about it, to hating it to the point where they are condemning it to hell. Do at least pique a little interest in why they hate it? Absolutely not. Look, when it comes to look, whatever happened with this game, that's its own thing. I have no interest in what has happened. I don't really care. I don't know what happened. I mean, I've heard what happened in the story, but heck, I was never interested in the story. I've stated this for several years. I don't hate The Last of Us. I do not hate it. I think it's a solid game. I'm glad it's part of the PlayStation exclusive lineup. I would give it a solid 8 out of 10. But when people say it's the greatest game of all time and they won't shut the hell up about it, that was the point where I started disliking it because of the fans' opinion and its overpraising. You won't see me overpraise any type of game. I mean, I consider Metal Gear Solid 3, in my opinion, to be my favorite video game of all time. But you don't see me screaming it to the heavens every 5 fucking minutes. So that was my issue with The Last of Us. It's just a solid game. And I consider it then, now, and probably till the day I die to be the single most overrated video game in the history of this industry. So whatever Naughty Dog decides to do in its sequel, it's their game. They can do whatever the heck they want. I don't really care. I had no interest in The Last of Us Part 2. I have no intentions on ever playing it, so I don't think I can have an opinion on the game itself, because I was never interested in the game. So heck, if Naughty Dog decides that they want to pull a Star Wars The Last Jedi and completely decide to piss off its fan base, that's their choice, but I don't really care. If people hate it, they hate it. If people like it, they like it. If Naughty Dog wants to ruin their franchise, that's their choice. So... yeah, I really don't care much about how the game turned out or its response to it, because I was never interested in the game to begin with. So, yeah, to each his own. I mean, that's just my thoughts on the whole situation. I generally did not even give it much attention because I had no interest in the game. So that is their game, that is their choice, so, yeah. Next question comes from Wes H, and you want to know, Star Wars versus Lord of the Rings versus Harry Potter. What's best and what's worse? What's best and what's worse? That's tough. Star Wars is in a bad position because of Disney. Lord of the Rings hasn't really done anything in a long time. And Harry Potter's in a bad position because their author has completely lost her goddamn mind. And it's in such a bad state that Harry Potter needs to be protected by the fans from its own creator. But if I could pick which one is worse, probably, I think, and that's tough. I think, just out of principle, I think Star Wars is in the worst position because it's Disney and they just want to screw up all their properties. And I think Lord of the Rings is probably in the best position, even though I openly confess I've never read the books, I've only seen the movies. And I don't think the Hobbit trilogy was all that bad, and I don't really think you can do more with the franchise. You see, with Star Wars and Harry Potter, there's definitely more you could do with them, both in terms of content and in terms of movies. I have no doubt we'll be going back to the Harry Potter universe very, very soon. But you can't do that with Lord of the Rings. But I would say out of all three of them, I'm the least fan of the Lord of the Rings. I'm definitely a bigger fan of Harry Potter and Star Wars, so yeah, I would say Star Wars is in the worst position because its owners are just don't know what they're doing. Harry Potter is probably in the middle, and I guess Lord of the Rings is at the top simply because they haven't done anything that hurts its franchise, even though it's not doing anything with its franchise. So I think that's how I would place it just out of default. Next question comes from GOG, and you want to know which character from Killzone games do I like the most? Probably Rico, simply because he's the only character that appears the most, and he does seem to have the most personality. I mean, outside of Killzone 1, you only hear about 2 of those characters, and one of them gets killed in the second game, and so he's the only one that manages to kind of survive the entire conflict. So I guess just out of default, I'd go with Rico. And even though he is a bit of a racist at first, but heck, he kind of changes over the course of the game. And the last question of the episode comes from Red, and you want to know, do I think Square Enix should have released... Do I think that Square Enix should have released Final Fantasy VII Remake, a full game like the original with 3 discs instead of having it released in parts? You know what? Now that I've seen what they did with Final Fantasy VII, whatever you want to call it, I don't really care anymore. It is such a strange paradox with Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy, I would say at this point, is like the most polarizing franchise because you have 4 games in 4 significant positions with me. You have Final Fantasy VII, the original, and that is the single most important game I've ever played. You have Final Fantasy X, which is my favorite JRPG of all time, and as it stands, is my second favorite video game of all time. Then you have 13, which is by far the worst video game I've ever played, to the point where I almost quit gaming. And then you have whatever you want to call Final Fantasy VII, whatever the hell you want to call it, remake, reboot, or reshit, whatever the hell you want. And that's the worst video game I'll never play. And the fact that they want to stretch this crap over years is just insulting. So, no, at this point, now that I've seen what they want to do with this series and want to completely fuck it up, I don't really care what they want to do with it. I didn't play this Final Fantasy VII remake, reboot, or whatever the hell you want to call it, part 1, and I don't plan on playing its other parts. I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist. That's how I feel. It does not exist. And now Final Fantasy is once again in a bad position with me. Just when it was in a good position after 15. I mean, 15 wasn't perfect, but at least it helped move the franchise, at least for me, back in a good place. And this game just screwed all that up, and I haven't even played it. And I don't even plan on playing it. I mean, you managed to screw up the single most important video game to the point where I think people are going to forget that there ever was an original. And that I find just very disrespectful. And if you guys heard that noise, that's just the air conditioning. So, yeah, at this point, I don't care. I don't care. I think if they'd released the full game, seeing how much damage they did to the story, I think I would have been even more pissed off. I mean, for God's sakes, I mean, when you screw up characters so bad to the point I can't even recognize them, I can't even recognize her. I don't know what the hell they did with my girl Tifa, but I don't know who that bitch is in the game, but that is not Tifa. I don't know who the hell these characters, they are completely unrecognizable. I have no idea who they are. I mean, this is worse than the last Jedi. I mean, oh, you know what? I'm not even going to talk about it. I'm not even going to talk about it. Otherwise, I'm going to... Like, to think that there's actually a game out there that if I actually played it, I'm probably going to end up hating it more than 13. Because at least 13 is its own thing that screwed up everything. But to make a game that feels like a terrorist attack on me for the second time, and I promise I would never walk into something like that again. I knew there was something wrong with 13 before I started playing it, and I should have listened to my instincts, but I was pushed into trying it out. But this one, I ain't making that mistake a second time. Because if I play that game, I'll probably want to quit gaming, and this time I'm going to go all the way. So that's just how I feel about the whole situation. So that's pretty much the ending of all the questions that I thought were good enough to enter the video for this particular video. I hope you guys have enjoyed me answering these questions. If you guys have any more questions you'd like me to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type them in the comments down below, but make sure to end me roughly before Wednesday around noon before I start filming the next episode. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.